Welcome to episode 83 of the Driving Forward podcast. Whether you're joining us live or listening on one of our 18 platforms, including Wreaths Across America Radio, where we broadcast every Tuesday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time, we appreciate your support. Next week on Driving Forward, Robert Bain steps in as host for a special episode. Actually, Bain's going to be hosting for the next 3 weeks, but he'll be featuring Jennifer Karpus Romaine, the executive director of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, or TMSA. They'll be chatting about how TMSA is reshaping the way logistics companies think about branding, marketing, and sales in a changing freight landscape. Also, knowing these two, the topics may go all over the place, so tune in to see where that just might go. For the following 2 weeks, Bain continues his takeover as host of Driving Forward with a critical conversation on cybersecurity and freight fraud. He'll be joined by Ben Wilkins from the NMFTA, along with GLCS's own Zach Barnhouse, to discuss the threats facing today's supply chains and what can actually be done about them. If you care about protecting your freight, your data, your reputation, you won't want to miss this one. Join GLCS and Bain at TMSA Elevate June 8th through June 10th. We're excited to be a partner with TMSA, and Bain will be speaking on elevating your personal brand. We've locked in on our next freight movement event. It's going to be in Chicagoland, specifically Rosemont, Illinois. And we're partnered with our friends at Journey, Revinova, Multi-Service Fuel Card, and of course, Broker Carrier Summit. We're really excited about this one. It's at Joe's Live. We'll put an Eventbrite link in comments, and we'd love to have you join us if you're able to. We have room for 200 people, and there's already a ton of people signing up. So join in. We'd love to see you there. Now, today we're doing something a little different. We're flipping the mic and switching seats. The guest is technically me, but the real spotlight is on the man holding the mic this time, Sharm Chelliah. Sharm is the sales director at Greenscreens.ai, where he's helping freight brokers bring clarity and confidence to pricing through the power of AI and real-time data. Sharm has 15 years of experience spanning enterprise tech, international freight, and logistics platforms. He's worked with everyone from Coca-Cola and Home Depot to BMAC Logistics and Hirschbach. But don't let the job title fool you. Sharm's much more than a sales leader. He's a former Flexport strategist, a micro strategy data wizard, a freight philosopher, and yes, occasionally a DJ dropping mixes between posts about predictive pricing. He's born in New Zealand, raised on tech and hustle, and now based in Atlanta with his growing family. Sharm brings a rare combo of sharp insight and dry wit and big picture thinking to everything that he does. And today he's bringing all that energy to this show as he flips the script and puts me in the hot seat. So Sharm, let's bring in Sharm. Welcome to Driving Forward, and this is your show from here on out.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Nate. I think we've got a new job for you as hype man. I'm going to for sure for the next gig. So thank you very much for that very warm intro, and thank you very much for letting me do this.
Absolutely.
So Nate, so kind of how this came about. We actually met, about a year and a half ago at F3.
Yeah.
And it's funny, this is actually just when you were just starting, all this work, around your podcast. And so it's great to see where it's gone. And I think one of the things that's been interesting is your execution on really trying to connect, right, the community help it grow and foster these relationships, not only just for this podcast, but then also what you're doing with Freight Movement, which has been, great for me, right? And so, we had, known each other here and there, and we kind of bonded over the technology side, right, of Freight. But I went to Matt's to learn about drivers, learn about trucking. I slept on a couch. Chris, Indie Trucker, was happy to host me up. And I thought I didn't know any other truckers. And we got to talking, and I was like, whoa, hey, hold up. You have a super interesting story here. There's a lot that I can learn here. And so that's kind of how this kind of came about. This is selfishly for me, one, to get to know you better, and to just dig your brain for all this fascinating insight, particularly at the intersection, of drivers, driving companies, and technology.
Absolutely. I'm excited. We loved the idea. So we got to make this happen.
Yeah. So I actually like to start out because, even though we've interacted, right, there's just a lot I don't know about you. And so I want to actually start out with one of my favorite questions to get to know someone. And that is, tell me 3 things that you want to do that you haven't done.
3 things that I want to do that I haven't done. So number 1, I've been kicking around for a while writing a book, and I've got the idea, I've got the name of the book, but I need to actually spend the time. I don't have a lot of time, so but I need to make that time. I'd love to write a book. So
all right, okay. So number 1.
Yeah. So number 1. The next one is and I kind of get philosophical, I think, a little bit on this. So you think about your career, and I've been in this industry 30 years, and I've run a number of different businesses, and I've owned a number of different businesses. And you get so focused on that. If you've ever heard the saying, you have to do less so you can do more. And that's something I've done throughout my career. Is I look at things in my life and I say, I can't do that anymore because I need to do this, and I need to focus on this. And so part of that, you have to choose things that maybe you wanted to do, but they just weren't a priority at that time. And so my answer to number 2 is reconnecting with a part of me or parts of me that get left behind.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Good. Okay, what's number 3?
All right. So number 3 is ultimately leave behind something that my family, that my teams, that my vendor partners, and that even competitors respect. So the more of a legacy answer than anything else, I would say.
Perfect. Nice. Well done. These are great answers. Okay. And then second part of the question, tell me 3 things that you've done that you're proud of.
Well, first answer is being a dad, and not only just a dad, but a partner and everything for my family and my friends and everyone close to me. And, no one's ever perfect, but that's probably the most thing that I'm proud of is just that in my life. So that's number 1. I think number 2, I'm not, so take this how you want, I'm not a quitter. I have a ridiculous amount of grind to me. I think a lot of this in the industry get that way. And if you look at those that are very successful in transportation and logistics, that's what they do. They grind. So, which effectively means that you just keep finding a way to make things work. And there's plenty of moments where you want to walk away, but you stay and you figure it out and you keep going. So, and that actually goes into the portrayed, what you portray to family and kids and what they see, and how they learn from you on that too. So, the fact that you just keep going at things, and sometimes younger kids don't necessarily see that. My kids are getting a little older now, as we were talking about previously. So I think they do start to see it as they get older in life, and they start realizing, exactly what you do and how much effort you're putting into things. So, a lot of that, I think that's kind of a long answer for number two, but that's number
No,
two.
no, that's great. And I can clearly tell because you had very ambitious goals for what you were planning on executing with this podcast and everything. When we talked to you, you've done it all. So that's great. Okay, cool. What's number three?
So so as far as number three, I think I'm proud of the fact that, and I didn't, when I was thinking about this, so relationships outlast deals. And I'm proud of that. I have so many relationships in the industry, and many of these people are friends, and they're my closest friends. So, but relationships outlast deals, and that is something that I have established relationships with people that are going on 3 decades, and we've worked together on a variety of levels. Maybe there's a 5 or 10 year gap in there. Maybe some things didn't go so well in between. I look at scenarios where we've cut ties on either end. Either I've cut it or they've cut it, but yet we're still friends, and we still have a good relationship. And there are so many of those, and that is a lifetime of effort. So that goes back to, I look back at the industry and how I tackled learning everything that I know, going to conferences, meeting everyone, running around being crazy, just learning and meeting. And that's how I networked in the beginning 20, 30 years ago. And that as number three is certainly something that I'm proud of. So, and it's the basis of a lot of my platform.
Yeah, and so that's great. You're kind of teaming me up there. We're definitely going to come back to relationship. It's going to be a big topic here with technology. I do want to dig into a little bit on this book. So, like, do you have, you got the title? Do you have, the topic, and what in particular? Why a book versus just a blog, or
Sure. It could be a blog. I mean, I can do a blog. I mean, I write all the time online. So I as far as a blog goes, just watch me on LinkedIn. So I'll write whatever I want to write.
Or even Twitter.
So yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been posting Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pretty much same content now for some time. But the book is got a title to it, and it's a working title, but it's called "Guys, What the Hell Are We Doing?" And it's so Mike Turner on our team used to say that all the time, still says, we talk about that. There's a lot of sayings that we have that have culminated over the years, along with if Rich Wolf is listening, this is huge. So, or it's going to be huge. So we'll use a lot of these idiisms or whatever you want to call them in the novel, but it's largely going to be around the way that you can find product through chaos or production through chaos, and real world examples. And I don't want to corner myself to the exact subject matter on the book, because I feel in a lot of ways, if you're going to just write a book that's about a generic topic, you kind of got to let the book sort of form itself and put words to paper, and then see how it builds out. So,
well, no, I think that's great. I do like the aspect of just kind of keeping it broad, right? Because there's chaos at home and family, there's chaos. Purposely, there's chaos, and the environment. Then there's also chaos. And then now we just talked about it. Well, it's getting so connected that we're not connected, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So, okay, cool. This is great here. And then I think the other part, too here. So, not a quitter. This kind of ties in. So I don't know if I read this, right, or listened to this right. So you got into trucking because your dad said that you couldn't back up a truck?
That's one of the things. I mean, I say that. That's probably not the reason. The true reason is I didn't want to go into law enforcement. That had been my education path thus far. And I decided that was not going to be the direction I wanted to go in. And that's something that my dad did say to me. And, one thing when I was younger, if you wanted me to do something, tell me I couldn't do it. That. Just tell me that it's not possible, and I would figure out a way. If I wanted to do it, I was going to figure out how to do it. Today, I still have some of that, but it's got to be something I actually want to do. So, so when I decided law enforcement was not a path for me, I thought I'm going to go get a Class A. I'm going to go see the world, and let's see where it goes from here. And it was not meant to be a 30-year path. It was meant to be, a year or two driving over the road, see the country, figure out where I wanted to move, where I liked, what area of the country I liked, etc. I grew up in Minnesota, really hadn't left Minnesota much at that point. I'd done some trips, but most of my trips were hiking and that type of thing out in the middle of nowhere. So I really wasn't a city person in my younger years. So.
And so when, around what time was this? How long was this?
21, 22. Yeah. I had already been working in industry prior to that, working in towing companies and that type of thing. So I was already sort of adjacent to transportation in some way, shape, or form. So the idea of getting the Class A was not really. I mean, my dad had something to do with it by saying you can't do it, and then I was already there working with equipment and that kind of stuff. That was my job while I was in school and whatnot. So.
And now, so what was the technology? Was there any technology at that time? Was it all paper logs? Were you physically going in and picking up a load? Like what was?
Yeah. So in the cab, my first driving job, we did have Qualcomm. I worked for Gainey Transportation and GTS out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. But we did not have cell phones. I mean, cell phones were out, but nobody had them in a widely deployed way. You were stopping and still using payphones. So I actually was just talking about this on last week's episode too. So you go and plug quarters. You'd buy rolls of quarters because of you'd end up needing them, calling shippers. If they didn't have 800 numbers mattered. So if you didn't have an 800 number, you're plugging quarters. So and my first load that I ever took was actually out of I think Kalamazoo, Michigan to Manhattan as a 21-year-old driver, which is, knowing what I know now, absolutely insane to ever dispatch a brand new driver that has 0 miles by himself on the road to Manhattan. Not the wisest idea, but it worked out. So yeah, it was, we did have Qualcomm, but following that, I went to companies that did not. So there was no, ELD, it was all paper logs. That was very common up until I ended up getting out of the operations end and moving to technology. Most companies weren't on EOBRs or ELDs up through 2010, 2011. That was just kind of being adopted at that time. So.
And so kind of tying back to your relationships, right? So as a driver, like who were you, were you making relationships just instantly? Were you making relationships with your shippers? Like what was some of those interactions like?
Back then I was company driver. So I was, young and just point me in a direction and go. And so I would get my dispatch, you'd pull out your Rand McNally map, you'd figure out where to go. And I was a sieve back there on just trying to understand how the industry worked in general. How over the road, what I would define as how over the road regular route carriers function. And, GTS was 1,000, 1,500 truck fleet, something like that. And so I got to understand, I'd walk into dispatch and that was like, this is actually kind of interesting. It was a big enough organization that it looked interesting. They had a war room. They had, it caught my interest on this is maybe I want to learn more here. And I started talking to them about the TMS and that what I now know they're on Innovative. So, but many, many years ago, wouldn't have had a clue what they were on then. It may have been Westinghouse. I'm not sure, but either way, it was an AS400. And go through that. And so there wasn't a whole lot of relationship that was built initially. I eventually moved into an office of another organization, and that's when I'd say things started to shift. But as a driver back then, there wasn't a lot of networking. You didn't have cell phones. We didn't have apps. We had our CVs, and if you wanted to call home, you're using a phone card or quarters. So
how did you entertain your time? Is radio or just silence?
So back then, VHS tapes in the truck. They also had an old system that you could plug this coaxial cable into. This was around back then. They had them all wired into the ground, and you could plug them back in. But yeah, it was a quiet, lots of reading. I used to read, a book every couple days. So, but it was a different world back then. Yeah. So I think that's a generational thing. So I think my generation, we grew up through all of this technology change. But we're also used to not having, or were used to not having that phone in our pocket all the time. So it wasn't around back then. So
no, yeah, that's I even just forgot about physical map, and then just payphone and quarters. So okay, so then you moved right now. So you're a driver. You were interested. Hey, interested in part of this technology, kind of how the operations work. You gravitated to there. And so where'd you move next?
So I had a couple different driving positions, and then ended up moving to a bulk carrier in Minnesota, and worked in dispatch and safety there for a couple of years. And I actually built. So we had sort of the TMS that accounting entered everything into at the end of the day, but I had to work differently. So I started building out sort of a lightweight operations tool. I wouldn't give it the full TMS title, but it was definitely easier to manage operations there. And it was like I said, a local bulk operation, and got my mind started changing. I was being mentored by the business owner and one of the operations or the operations manager, who I consider one of my mentors in the industry at this point. And I think I haven't talked with him in many, many years, but he's got to be 90 now. So he was definitely old school, former driver. But learned a small carrier setup at that time. Learned, this is in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think it bridged because my next role was, I remember September 11th happened just as I was starting into my next role. But so there was not a lot of technology there at all. So
so how did it work? So for for dispatch, and what were some of the skills that the driver that you took over to dispatch and safety? But what were some of the stuff you actually you had to learn, kind of coming over?
Sure. At this organization, I had actually driven there for a little while before, and because of the complexity of hauling bulk, being aware of what the drivers are doing was important. So we had a lot of bulk pneumatic, similar. I was doing what Chris Thomas does,
okay.
Same sort of systems. And I also hauled anhydrous ammonia and things that would end your life in a short period of time or make it miserable. And so I did that for a little bit. So then when I came into the office, I could talk firsthand with the drivers about the commodities they were hauling, and I knew that inside and out. But as far as just the general driver experience being in an office at that time and at that size of an organization, plus the proprietary knowledge that you need hauling bulk and hazardous material, that just helped out to make that work. There was virtually no technology at that time. We had no tracking. It was all over the phone.
This phone, right? Okay.
Cell phones just started to become more common then. I remember I had my first cell phone when I was working there. So
did everyone? So yes, 2000. So everyone's got desktops, right? And there's an internet.
No one had desktops. I had a laptop that I used from my personal stash that I brought in every day. But otherwise, we were all on. There was a board of paper, and we moved. We had basically we're a card filing system. So But I that's where I moved everything off the card onto a digital piece. So if I got a call at 2:00 in the morning, I didn't have to have tons of information. I just crack my laptop and go. But then back then you had to wait 5 minutes for your laptop before. So.
Now, with this operations app, what was it built on? Was it just like an Excel application?
It was really, really advanced Excel for that era. So it had
and that was your first. And that was kind of your first.
I didn't know anything about anything back then. Yeah, so it was that, and it just kept building out and building out to where when I left, they asked to continue using it, so I handed it over to them. So,
right, okay. So what was that feeling like? Like, what was that like? Why did that kind of give you, a buzz, right?
So I always loved technology. Even at that era, I didn't realize how much I loved technology for this particular industry because I hadn't really been immersed in it yet. But what I started realizing is I could see pathways that maybe not everybody could see from a process standpoint, and how to leverage technology to, streamline a particular process, even though I didn't fully grasp all the technology yet. So that's what I started looking forward into my next role, which was essentially just find a larger organization or an organization that's more interested in technology than where I was currently at. So that became somewhat of my pivot point to now I need to be a technologist moving forward and be at an organization that is going to support me along that line as well.
And was that kind of where your first, kind of foray into leadership was as well? Or did you kind of...
Yeah, I was managing drivers at this particular organization. My next role was an expedited path into executive management. I was really moved from a dispatch role, and 90 days later, I was running the company. So that happened really, really fast. And then we grew really, really fast. So that was fun. It was interesting. It was something that I didn't think I'd experience again. And uniquely, you're not going to experience those exact succession of events again. But we had a great time. And a lot of you go and you talk to a lot of the former employees that were there, and they all look back on that organization with the same fond thoughts.
What would you say are the top 3 things that were done right to kind of accelerate that growth?
Hiring the right people, training the right people. So if you want to categorize that together, but you got to hire and train, and then continue to train. And to go along with that, you have to fire fast. So and that took me a minute to figure out. The technology, understanding the technology, deploying technology quickly. So we were very technology advanced at the next organization. So much so that in many cases I've worked with close to 2,000 different trucking companies and brokerages now, and I would venture 70% of them aren't as advanced as what that company was that we sold in 2006. So 20 years ago, and I mean we had our finger on everything. We knew our detention. We were creating opportunities to review detention as it was happening, and then it would sit there after we would depart. It would sit there and require customer service to reach out to people. This is back in 2004, 2003. We were doing this. We had lifetime fuel. So as cards were swiped, not only were we getting that lifetime fuel in, we were seeing the lifetime fuel mileage of trucks and could manage the deviations. So if we saw, a fuel theft opportunity, we would deal with that. We were managing our tires. There was just a lot of things that we do that a lot of organizations are just thinking about doing now. But that was all through what was possible through the technology that we deployed. And then we'd just sit on a think tank and we'd figure out how to do it. So.
Okay. Very, very cool. Are we taking a pause?
Yeah, I think so. That's perfect. I'm glad you were watching that. So we'll be back.
I'm the host.
If you guys have any questions for Sharm or myself, feel free to queue them up and send them in. If your fleet's downtime looks like chaos, you're missing out on GLCS. In the fast-paced world of trucking and logistics, time is everything. Meet GLCS, your expert partner in managed IT services. We integrate seamlessly with your team, bringing seasoned IT professionals with deep transportation and logistics expertise. Imagine your software updates running smoothly, complex issues resolved quickly, and operations humming with efficiency. GLCS has your back. Our support doesn't just fix problems, it prevents them. With our industry connections and proactive approach, we keep your trucks rolling and your brokers working. Think of us as the added resource your company needs to unleash its full potential. Visit glcs.net today and keep your business driving forward. GLCS, where efficiency meets expertise. And we're back.
All right. So, okay, you just dropped like a bunch of different technology that I also know that is not necessarily in existence or widely adopted. But I want to go particularly on the detention. So
Sure.
tell me about how you were managing that, and immediately after the driver, left, you've got, CSR calling up,
Right.
that's
Or why they're there, actually. It would be why they're there in many cases. So simply, if you're a live dispatch situation as an asset-based carrier, you have to manage those accurate times. That's number one priority for a dispatcher or a driver manager, or whatever that role that you have in your organization. So when that truck arrives at the location, whether they're breaching, in today terms, if you're breaching a geofence or if you're arriving, that just needs to be live time updated in a TMS. And from there you have a timer that starts, right? So and maybe you have a contract with a customer and that's at 2 hours, but that's variable based upon the customer. So in today's terms, you could set it up to be managed through whatever terms you have with a customer. But who knows? At 2 hours, we would typically start charging a customer. So at an hour and a half, it starts popping up on exception queues that we would have. And we had dashboards that were exception queues, and they were plastered throughout the office. So not to mention on everybody's desktop too. So if there's a CSR, they're going to get that on their exception queue saying they need to reach out to the customer and tell them we're going into a scenario that we may be hitting detention. Same situation with the driver manager. They're going to be notified that the driver is getting into a scenario that they're going to be paid detention. Now, we pay detention whether we build it or not. But the scenario is we aggregated that. So anytime that you have a scenario that you're trying to manage a process, you need to build in a couple layers of reporting or business intelligence or what I call business activity monitoring first. That's the lowest layer. So the business activity monitoring is monitoring that couple layers of are we there? Are we approaching our time? And then we've exceeded our time. We're now into detention. And we have this scenario now that we need to build this detention. So once the truck actually departs, let's say we've already reached out to our customers and whatnot, and so they're alerted. But now we need actuals. Now we've been there for 4 hours. We're going to build 2 hours of detention, but the truck's already departed, so we're good there. We alerted the customer, that checkbox was taken care of due to our process. So there's some solutions that automate this too, but I mean there are now today
but
some solutions.
And so with this we using still ELDs to be able to get this data? Like, was this possible before?
We didn't have any mobile communication back then.
So how are you?
We didn't even have Qualcomms in the truck. We were dispatching over the phone. So this was just process. This is pure process. Drivers would call in. I arrived at the shipper. or I arrived at the consignee, or whatever the case was, and then at an hour and a half, if they weren't, so the timer would start then, amongst many other timers that we monitored, But same thing with check calls. Drivers had to call in the morning by a certain time, and it was very, very controlled.
So, and then so it sounds like, because I think one of the things, coming from kind of the data background and being over here at brokerage, is like pretty much everybody seems to be a data company now, and you got to move.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Customers, yeah.
Yeah, you got to move the data sometimes even faster than you move the actual physical goods. But it can be really hard, right, to implement these processes if there isn't a culture of data entry,
right,
and process. So, when you kind of came in, was that already like part of the culture, especially back then when when literally people, like, if they don't follow the process, then the data doesn't even exist, right?
The positive thing at this company is when I came in, we were 40 trucks, and when we sold, we were way, 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 way more than that. So we got to build it as we went. So that became this organization. I mean, we would add on a ridiculous. I mean, we'd open a terminal and add on 100 trucks, and that would take 30 to 60 days, and we wouldn't even notice it in operations. So that wouldn't, just because we had a staff.
So how did you? That's not something to gloss over, right? So that's a tough thing to do. So how, you're dealing with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, right? And change. So what were some of like the principles, right, or values that you had to enforce and, kind of get everyone's mind here, like, hey, this is how we do things. And, one thing like do it, and, everyone's on board and they do it. And then like a month later, things start to like slowly, devolve.
Yeah. So you have, I say this to everyone, and there's still a lot of organizations out there that haven't changed in 20 or 30 years. They're still doing the same thing that they did in the late 90s. And they're so niche that they can get away with that. But now they're starting to look and say, okay, we need to change now. So when I like to tell this to almost every logistics organization out there, is once you start changing, don't stop. Just continue to build a culture of change. If you build a culture of change, you're always changing, you're always adapting to it. You have a team that understands it. They understand you still need to build your standard operating procedures. You need to document your processes. You need to do all of those things so you don't degrade in your training on the same things. But you want to always be in a case of process improvement. So that's that continuous change. If you don't take that role with your company, what's the point of even doing the massive project? So you're going to do a massive process change, a massive improvement project, and then just stay exactly the same now for another 30 years, so you can't do that, right? So the world changes way too fast right now. It didn't back then, but we sort of act like it was. We were pretty unique. There's a few other organizations that were kind of like us back then too.
Okay, and so then that kind of leads you now after that. Is that when you started GLCS, or did you have a stint?
No, then I did a few other things and eventually ended up with Trimble or TMW. So that's when I decided I'm no longer going to be on the trucking operations side and running companies. I had an opportunity to run operations for one of the largest carriers in Minnesota, or to go to TMW, and I decided to take a step back and roll, and I went to TMW and spent a little while there doing one role.
Was that? What were you hoping?
Passion. I knew if I went to another carrier, I was going to get bored. I no matter the size of the organization, I would come in, I would accomplish what needs to be accomplished, and then I wasn't going to stay. It would be 2 or 3 years, and it would be time to find something else. And I understand what that career path would have looked like. And I'd always been a technologist, always wanted to help other companies out. Actually, I was going to do something similar in 2006 when we sold the company we had talked about previously. But I chose. I was in my late 20s, and nobody wanted to. I was going to do it on my own, nobody's going to listen to something.
Nobody trusted you yet.
Nobody's going to listen to me. So it doesn't matter what I did. I a lot of people knew me, but I had a great network of people, but I'm not going to walk into, a $1 billion trucking company and have them listen to a 29-year-old. I had, there was no social media.
So what made you, I guess, there's an entrepreneurial spirit throughout kind of your career in general, but what kind of gave you the confidence, like, hey, I know enough here at this point that I can take this knowledge and really, make a bigger impact kind of consulting. That's pretty young.
When I started with, people would come to me, even our vendors would come to me and ask how they should deal with the situation. I'll attribute a lot to Bob Maddox. So he's the owner of Truckmate Maddox Systems, eventually acquired by TMW back in 2006. So worked a lot with Truckmate and worked a lot with Bob. And so he inspired a lot of that in me, I think, back in those days. And eventually ended up working with Bob for a hot minute in 2011 when I started at TMW. He retired almost immediately after I started there. But so it came down to people would come to me with particular.
Does that make sense? Now, do you were you building and solving the problems, for this tech, or were you more kind of, hey, here's the idea, connecting the people, here's the process implementing? Where do you find kind of the most?
So we primarily are facilitators. So, and then where we can't, and then this is the way it's always been, even going back to 20 some odd years ago, if I can't find a solution to solve the problem, then I'll find a way to build a solution to solve the problem. And maybe I won't take that solution to market, but I will find a way to resolve the problem one way, shape, or form. And that's the same principle that we use today here at GLCS too. We do have a development team. We use that development team to support all kinds of different vendors. And if they can't quite meet the requirements, we're going to augment or enhance some widget that meets the requirements. And I think that's there's a lot of really great freight tech out there today. There wasn't 20 some odd years ago. There's always a solution to get you part of the way there today. You just have to get the whole way. And so that's where we come in and add on that little extra juice to get it the full distance.
And where, when you started GLCS, did you have a specific kind of scope in mind, and has that been the same, or has it expanded? How's it changed? How's it evolved? Right?
Yeah.
What's some of the kind of leadership stuff you took, from the trucking side that's brought you over, to GLCS, and has anything been different now? Run your own thing, as a consulting, SaaS technology company.
Yeah. So originally GLCS started as a management consultancy. We were effectively doing reorganizations and turnarounds for regular route carriers. So they could have a brokerage component, all large middle market fleets, less than $1 billion a year, maybe less than $500 million a year, but more than probably 150 or 200. So we took that path at first, and there was a lot of requests for technology assistance, and so that evolved into, and that's what I was doing at TMW and to some extent, and so that sort of evolved into some of those offerings. We kept the management consulting. We still do some management consulting, but we now have evolved into technology, and we're now a managed service provider. So managed IT and a variety of services there. And then we still do we now do a ton of integrations. We were approached by one of our largest partners is Samsara. We were approached by them 6 years ago and started out a great partnership there too. So
nice. Okay. And so, as you've talked about, right, so I've kind of gone back and forth. I think we're at a point in the industry where you may not have a choice, right? You have to change. But I think in general, if you're a niche, maybe carrier, if you know what you're doing, you don't necessarily have to have adopted some of this technology. I've gone back and forth, even just on the brokerage side. Do you feel like you were at a point now where folks have to look at this or have to look at AI or have to look at like automation, or, is it still, hey, look, if we know what we're doing, we can kind of get by with what we got?
That's a loaded question. It depends upon each particular organization. So yes, there are niche carriers, there are niche brokers. Depending upon where you're coming from and where you want to go to, there's a different answer for that. If you are 30 years old in your technology stack, you're probably spending a ton of money just trying to keep your lights on, and that likely needs to be modernized. If you're a newer tech stack, you want to be technology edgy, you want to keep up with the Joneses. That's your choice. It's expensive. It's expensive to stay that way, and you're going to try a lot of things that maybe don't work, or maybe don't work for you. So, but be willing to change often and back out of those products, because sometimes that's an error that we see, is a tech stack that's redundant in its solution. So they maybe have 3 solutions that can be covered by one. We see that in several spaces, to be honest with you. And then also, simply, are you using your technology that you have today to its fullest capability? So that's actually the first question that anyone would ever ask from our organization is, are you using what you have today to its fullest capability, and do you want to move?
Yeah. So that's okay. You let me into that, because I try to do the same thing. What processes have you found? I'm guilty of it even right now. Gong is like my favorite like sales software ever. I love it, and I know there's a bunch more it can do, and I haven't had the time even just for myself. So is there anything for you, like just even personally, like how do you kind of try to keep up with what's new, and then how have you seen anything effective? My dad's still an engineer, so he's just been preaching to me my whole life: routine maintenance, right? And so part of that, is having that budget for maintenance, right, and investment in your current software. I always found it's really hard. When we were doing a MicroStrategy, we're doing like apps like Coca-Cola. It was like a P&L, like business intelligence reporting app on the iPhone. We had to always package in the maintenance into like a new feature, right? Like bundles. I always had to deliver something new and then like kind of hide the maintenance. And curious if you've seen that here, and how companies, how to manage it. Have you seen anybody do a good job of kind of staying up to date?
It's a culture thing, and some companies do better at it now than what they did before, and it's something that's always talked about in an improvement project. Is going forward, there needs to be training, and so maintenance, for example, I wouldn't call maintenance that in the terms that we're talking about it, like software maintenance. I would talk about it as training, continued training and education on the solutions that you currently have. And so that needs to be done, and it needs to be done annually or more often than that. And you asked, how do you maintain awareness of all the technology that's out there? So no, singularly, unless you're an enterprise fleet or an enterprise brokerage, you're not going to be able to keep up on all the technology out there today. There's too much. It's just way too much. Unless you are extremely savvy and extremely well networked, there's so much, and there's so many opportunities. And we have full-time people that just look into technology and are related to partnerships. And we dive into everything out there that we can get our hands on. And I still know that we're not hitting everything. We're hitting the majority of it. We get inquiries from people that want us to look at their solution. That's almost daily that we're getting new inquiries from new solutions. So as an operator, if you own a brokerage or a trucking company, you really have to be prescriptive about what you're going to look for. So if you feel like your TMS is old, you need to go out and look at not all the TMSs, because that's going to take you 4 years to get through. But go out and be selective on a few of them, understand what you like about them. And just because you see one doesn't mean that you have to go forward with it. Salespeople are aggressive. So you can
Yeah, I think I do because you know me. I'm like a nerd about this stuff. I love it,
Yeah,
and I'm like, dude, I feel like I was doing okay like last year. This year, I'm just like
it's
there's
been
no
a
chance.
big year. Yeah,
Yeah, I think in general, I've found I've been because I used to give folks like a ton of recommendations, and now I've been like, hey, like here's your best two, like, and I'm telling you, like these my customers love these, like pick one of these, pick one of these, like, and I think because otherwise you can just kind of get so overwhelmed, and then after a while it's paralysis, right? Because you're like, wait, that person had this feature that wait do we
right.
and then it's like, well, and so yeah, okay, cool. So Nate, actually, with the time we have, the thing that you are fantastic at, and that you have really also done a good job of helping others, right, is relationships, right? Connect and communicate. So, relationships are talked about like all the time, right? But what does it mean? Like, what does a relationship even mean, right? Does it mean that you say hi? What like does it mean that
No.
does it mean that I ask
Oh,
about your dog, every once in a while?
yeah.
What does a relationship mean?
So I think, if we're talking the business level relationships, I feel like, you know, I think Chad Olson had or him and I had an interaction quite some time ago about this on LinkedIn. So, and you have relationships and then you have partnerships, and those are two different things. So, but relationships are something about that organization or people at the organization to a point that you're gonna invest time there. So you're gonna, and that could be a day or a few hours here and there, whatever the case may be. But you're going to be thinking about that person when their scenario pops up that you need to reference them. So they're to me from a professional standpoint, that's at the minimum. That's what a relationship is. It's not just, hey, I bumped into this person and I have their business card. It's we've actually interacted, we broke bread. There's something that's built here, and usually it'll transcend organizations.
And so, how do you find? Have you put any systems in place to manage these? Is it just intuitive? To you. I feel like you and I are similar, where it just kind of pops in my head. I'm like, oh wait, I should, I should like kind of what we did here, right? I should,
Right.
So does that, do you have any Excel sheets or notes or anything? You're just kind of like, hey, you know what? Oh, you know what? It's probably time for me to give so and so a call.
So I don't. I have a massive contact list. So if I looked on my phone right now, I'd probably have 10,000 contacts on it. So to that point, there's a lot of people in on the business side where I need to probably reach out to them more often because you blink and a year goes by. There's only so much time in a day, but I look back on a variety of people. It doesn't matter if it's been 2 years or 10 years. Some of the relationships that are out there, it might have been 10 years. You go up to somebody, but yeah, remember that one time in Ontario? Yeah. So um, you have to have a meaningful interaction with someone, and potentially multiple meaningful interactions with someone.
I think also, something I think I picked up from you is because I think there's a connection and then there's a relationship, and there's value in both, right? You can
Sure.
kind of have a connection, and that I think that how you can help each other learn and grow, and then it kind of moves to relationship. But I think help first. It's like listen, kind of be curious, and then it's like, oh, you know what, I think I might be able to help. And I
Yeah.
think that's something you do kind of a really good job of, which then is like, oh wait, well, okay, hey, this guy helped me out. Wait, I want to help him.
Karma is everything. Not worrying so much about that bottom line for an initial relationship, not worrying about how you're going to build it into some form of transaction that's going to monetize. I think that's extremely important. So you have to, before this whole industry is about people, and you need to establish the relationship before you're going to build a meaningful book of business with anyone. in my opinion. This is how I've learned how to sell, and I was not the best salesperson for a long time. But then I leaned into the relationship side more and realized, this is relationship-based sales, and it's truly just solving problems, and that's what we're really good at. But you have to have that trusted partner side of, I'm going to help you solve your problem, whether it's the best thing for me to do or not. And that may be passing it on to the right person that is the party to resolve the issue. So I think that's extremely important.
I think it's probably a lot of what you and I do now, but this half of it is like, whoa, okay, yeah, I know you're talking about pricing, I know you're talking about this. Let's take a step back. What are you trying to do? Boo. Okay, you know what? This is probably actually the most important thing for you right now. Go do this, then come back.
Right.
So I think also too, because to me, I feel like we're coming full circle, right? So, we talk about relationships before all the technology. It's like, I knew who you were, you knew who I was. I pick up, hey, I need this load move. Boom, right, we're done. And then slowly, technology has removed a little bit of that relationship. And now I think we're potentially getting maybe to the point where the technology is getting to a place where we can actually, maybe get that back and know who each other is and, have some trust and things like that. What have you found in terms of technology where are some areas you've noticed that it maybe have created a lack of empathy or harmed sort of the relationship? And where do you see, have you seen anyone use, kind of technology to enhance the relationship?
So harm the relationship, I'd say anything that takes away from a meaningful communication with, in transportation, I'm going to use these use cases that take meaningful communication to the driver or the customer. So, we sort of were mandated into ELDs. Not that I am going to run too far down that road, but how they get deployed and how they're utilized in some cases, you still need to be able to communicate with those drivers. You need to have the meaningful conversations with them. If properly deployed, an ELD and driver workflow can mean that when you get on the phone with a driver, you can have a meaningful conversation with them instead of talking about load details. If not properly deployed, your phone calls just repeating what should be on the ELD, or maybe you're not even having a phone call with the driver, which is the mistake. So, and we see that happen probably more often than it should. So that'd be one example where it's not enhancing relationships. I'd say on an area where it does enhance relationships, just being able to free up time. So anything that reduces time, that's really the true value. When I look at AI, and I don't like to bring up a ton of AI, but AI as an industry is a time reduction tool for everyone. And so if you will say you have 60 hours a week that you're working, and AI solutions have the capability of reducing that to 30 hours a week, you're probably still going to work your typical 60 hours a week or 40 hours a week, whatever it may be. But it now allows you to develop more relationships and now more time on the phone, more time communicating, if you wish, those type of things. So I feel like that's the benefit of many of the solutions that are out there that are somewhat edgy right now. And in the long term, embracing those solutions give you more time if utilized to build out the relationships you didn't have time for.
Very cool. And then just last philosophical question. So do you think that humans are going to be, talking about relationships with AI or, AI? We've seen some AI, but I'm just curious if you have any, just thoughts on, are we going to see a blend of human and AI, relationships, or is it just going to, some of this stuff just going to be?
Wow. I don't know if I mean, there's plenty of movies about that. So I'm pretty sure it'll happen because anything that can happen does. So it probably already is happening, to be honest with you. So I would imagine, there's a lot of crazy products out there. So I see that becoming probably more of a thing. I mean, anytime science fiction has a tendency of becoming reality. So
yeah, awesome, man. Perfect.
Well, a huge thanks to you, Sharm, for taking the wheel today and turning everything back on me. It's nice to flip the switch and sit in the other chair for once on my own show. So.
No, this is great. I learned a ton, which is awesome, man. Had a blast. So thank you very much for letting me do this.
Yeah, appreciate it. So if today's conversation sparked something for you about leadership or technology or just taking the right step, then this mic swap was worth it. Sharm, any other thoughts in closing here?
No, I think we've covered,
Beautiful.
Here.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up then. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Until next time, drive forward with purpose and innovation. Thanks for watching.